Mark Webber was a tough, uncompromising and lightning-quick racing driver who won 9 Grand Prix in a long career characterised by a determination to prove he had what it took to compete at the highest level. Nothing came on a plate for Webber. He had to fight every step of the way to show the world he could go toe-to-toe with the best in the business, including his own teammate, as he battled for wins and the World Championship. In 2010, Red Bull's genius designer Adrian Newey produced the RB6, the car that would deliver the team's first World Championship success. But the first 4 races saw McLaren triumph twice with Jenson Button, while Fernando Alonso won the season opener for Ferrari. Sebastian Vettel had won in Malaysia after Webber had taken pole. But at the Spanish Grand Prix, Webber really hit his stride, sealing a brilliant pole and then holding off Vettel to win in dominant fashion. His title challenge was up and running, and to celebrate, he threw his helmet to the fans at the end of the race. Oriol, the lucky young boy who grabbed it, still holds it dear to this day. Driving an F1 car is a supreme feat of physical and mental strength, requiring world-class levels of fitness and absolute concentration. But at the 2007 Japanese Grand Prix at the Fuji Speedway, Webber showed that an illness that would stop mere mortals in their tracks wasn't about to slow him down when there was racing to be done. Hit with a bout of food poisoning, Webber went above and beyond.
Going to retirement. Vomiting, going on vomiting, we're going to drive. Understood. Box. I'll try and stay up, mate. I am reaching in the car, but honestly, I'll go.
So focused was he on his racing that not only did he keep going, he managed to climb up through the field from 8th place to 2nd, before he was rear-ended by his future teammate Sebastian Vettel, then driving for Red Bull's sister team, Toro Rosso. He may have ended the day without points. Jaguar arrived in F1 with big ambitions, but never managed to build a car capable of competing at the front of the field, and there were precious few red letter days during the Green Team's 5 years in the sport. But Webber delivered one at the 2004 Malaysian Grand Prix, when he put in a sensational lap in qualifying to stick his Jaguar R5 on the front row of the grid. The Australian was in superb form, nailing a lap in fully dry conditions that put him on provisional pole, and was then beaten only by the all-conquering Ferrari of Michael Schumacher to leave him P2 in a car that scored points only 5 times all season.
The team were absolutely wrapped. We are absolutely over the moon. We've done a really good job this weekend. We've done our preparation with Michelin and worked hard, and we hope we can get some good points tomorrow.
It was the only front row start Jaguar ever achieved in F1, and though Webber dropped down the order on race day, he'd proved his talent could mix it at the sharp end of the grid, even in a car that had no business being there. The pressure was already mounting on Webber as the 2011 championship battle moved on to China. The season was only 2 races old, but his Red Bull teammate Sebastian Vettel, reigning champion at the time, had won them both, and Webber needed a big haul of points to muscle his way back into the title race. The weekend started badly when electronic issues on his RB7 saw him knocked out of qualifying early, meaning he would start the race from a lowly P18. But Webber was often at his best when his back was against the wall, and so he proved on race day in Shanghai, as he picked off car after car, including the likes of Michael Schumacher and Fernando Alonso, to slot into P4 as the final lap began. He sealed a brilliant comeback with a last lap overtake on Jenson Button to secure his first podium of the year in typical swashbuckling style.
Mark Webber, after a stunning performance, is third and on the podium. His arm goes in the air, and rightly so.
2010 was a fractious year in the Red Bull camp as the team adjusted to being frontrunners, and Webber and teammate Vettel slugged it out for the World Championship, along with Ferrari's Fernando Alonso and McLaren's Lewis Hamilton and Jenson Button. Webber and Vettel had collided at the Turkish Grand Prix as tensions between the two boiled over, and each had 2 wins under their belt as the battle moved on to Silverstone for the British Grand Prix, but Vettel was ahead on points. Webber saw a chance to strike back, but was incensed when the Red Bull team took his new spec front wing, of which there was only one, and gave it to Vettel, after the German had damaged his in practice on Friday. After missing out on pole to Vettel by 1/10 of a second, Webber was in no mood to compromise on race day, and refused to yield when Vettel tried to squeeze him into Copse Corner on the opening lap. Webber took the lead as Vettel ran wide and picked up a puncture, leaving the Australian out in front and able to claim a superb victory, and making a clear point to the team with a now infamous radio message on his victory lap.
Well done, Mark, you drove very well today. Great job.
Fantastic, guys. Not bad for a number 2 driver. Cheers.
Webber's F1 career was characterised by his intense determination to get the best result possible, often when driving substandard machinery throughout plenty of difficult years with Jaguar and Williams. But though he would face years of struggle, his arrival in the sport was almost a fairy tale story, with F1's most popular underdog teams. Minardi hadn't scored a single point in over 2 years when Australian team owner Paul Stoddart was convinced to take a punt on fellow Aussie and then F3000 driver Webber for the first 3 races of the 2002 season. Their car was underdeveloped and underpowered, but in the season-opening race in Melbourne, 25-year-old Webber delighted the home crowd by bringing the car home in 5th place for 2 precious points in a race of attrition. He avoided a multi-car accident at turn 1 and fended off Mika Salo's quicker Toyota in the final laps.
Advance Australia fair, you've done it, boy. Fair dinkum. Mark Webber finishes in 5th place. It's a dream for Australia, a dream for Mark Webber, and a dream for Paul Stoddart, the owner of Minardi. He may never have a better chance to score 2 points than that.
It would be 2.5 years before Minardi scored points again, but Webber had announced his arrival in motorsport's top tier and given the huge Australian crowd a day they would never forget. Webber and Fernando Alonso were 2 of the quickest and most committed drivers on the grid, and delighted in racing each other, both knowing the other would fight hard but fair. In 2012, Alonso was leading the championship for Ferrari when the F1 circus rolled into Silverstone for the British Grand Prix, with Webber right behind him in the standings. Alonso started the race from pole, but Webber was P2 on the grid, and with 4 laps to go, was closing in on the Spaniard, having been within a few seconds of him throughout.
Now, has he got any curves left as Webber does get alongside him? Webber swoops past around the outside of Brooklands. Mark Webber leads the British Grand Prix.
Passing the Ferrari around the outside of Brooklands with a superb move as the 2 rivals battled wheel to wheel around one of F1's fastest circuits. Alonso tried to fight back, but Webber had him covered and went on to take the win. It was his final victory in Formula 1 and had been earned the hard way as was usually the case for the battling Aussie. Webber would come closest to winning the championship in 2010, and after taking pole and the win at round 5 in Barcelona, he arrived in Monaco on top form, and promptly took his second pole in a row with a masterful lap that put him 0.4 of a second ahead of teammate Sebastian Vettel. On race day, Webber kept calm during 4 safety car periods, managing to dodge a late crash between 2 backmarkers that happened right in front of him, to seal a superb victory on the streets of the Principality, the first for an Australian since Jack Brabham in 1959, which put him top of the driver standings. Describing it as the highlight of my life, Webber had proved his title credentials on the most challenging circuit of them all, and he celebrated in style, backflipping into Red Bull's swimming pool. Audacious, brave, committed, determined. Just 4 words to describe what is surely the best overtaking move of Mark Webber's career. The stage was the fabulous Spa-Francorchamps racetrack in Belgium, specifically its most fearsome corner, Eau Rouge. And his rival that day was as tough as they come, Fernando Alonso in a Ferrari. As Webber thundered down towards one of the most famous corners in the world, as he tucked up behind the Scarlet Ferrari, then pulled out to the left and kept his right foot pinned to the floor as they swept through Radion.
Oh, they're so close on the way in, and Alonso had to yield, and just as well he did. Incredibly brave move from Mark Webber there.
It was a breathtaking manoeuvre by one of F1's most fearless drivers, which proved Webber wasn't just a gritty fighter. He also had the skills to match the very best in the world. One could say Webber didn't earn his seat at F1's top table. While a few lucky drivers like Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen and Sebastian Vettel found themselves in race-winning cars early on in their F1 careers, the Australian had to cope with subpar machinery for most of his first 7 years in the sport. It wasn't until 2009 that he had a car capable of matching his talent, and when he did, he proved what many had suspected all along, that he was a race winner in waiting. Jenson Button had dominated the first half of the 2009 season for the Brawn team, with Red Bull snapping at their heels as designer Adrian Newey further refined the RB5. In a wet-dry qualifying session at the Nürburgring, Webber took his first pole position, but the race itself was far from plain sailing, as a messy first lap saw him drop down to 3rd after contact with Rubens Barrichello and Lewis Hamilton. Things got worse when he was handed a drive-through penalty for the clash with Barrichello, as his dreams of a maiden win looked to be unravelling. But when he came out of the pits, he had the bit between his teeth, and with some trademark Aussie grit, he hunted down Barrichello to seal a hard-fought victory that perfectly summed up his F1 career. It had taken him 130 races, but now he was finally a winner in Formula 1.
And now it's going to be victory for Mark Webber, his first in Formula 1. And if he wants to be world champion, that's exactly what he needed to do.
Yeah! There it is! Yes! 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 Yes!
It's an incredible day for me. I wanted to win so badly. Of course, there's a few people that doubted me as well, so hello to them as well. It's just an incredible day for all the people that have helped me get to where I am.